Perfect timing.
Okay,
Get rid of the got it.
yes, just good.
Charging my mouse. And so
Bernie, good morning. Reva, good morning.
Good morning.
Come
Hi,
on.
Reva.
Hi, Lorraine. Morning,
Hi.
everybody.
I go
Good.
this way.
It's snowing again, and the snow from 3 snows ago is still here.
Ah, wow.
Wow,
well, it's gonna stay for a while, probably. Yeah.
The
Yeah, we may
supermarkets deliver, right?
say again.
The supermarkets deliver.
Why do I need a supermarket? They cook for me here.
Yeah.
Good for you. Do they cook good?
Yeah,
They
depends
have-
on which chef we have.
Yeah. The best of the retirement homes don't have the greatest food, you know, it comes down.
My
It's-
aunt complains every single day.
Who is that?
My aunt,
Your
she's
aunt?
103. She
Oh,
complains every day. The food is bland, you know, this and that, and this and that.
but
Gotta
she's
carry
still
around-
here at
But
103.
she's still here at 103, yes.
Yeah,
Amazes me.
Well, I had dinner a couple of times with a friend over at Heritage, and there were choices, and I thought it was good for
Oh, good.
for what it was. It was good.
Right.
well, they always have, most of the places, I think, give you choices.
Yes,
uh,
yes.
But
That's
that
true.
doesn't mean that, you know, when it shows up, it's like a great.
Yeah, but it wasn't all little old ladies and moo-moos and walkers, you know?
I was over at the place Harvey was in, and I didn't think it was any great shakes, you know.
Really?
I would
Which
order
was-
soup or something like that, you know, if I was eating with him, just to
Which place was that?
Chaparral Winds over, that was in.
Yeah, I had, my friend Linda was there.
Linda was over there, yeah.
That's the place with walkers and ladies with moo-moos.
Well, yeah, but she was in the independent
So,
area.
so was Linda.
Yeah, I know, she was. Harvey was an assisted, but I think it's the same kitchen.
Independent ladies walk with walkers. Here
Yes.
I
There you go.
But
am.
not
Be
with the
careful what you
moo-moo.
say.
Lorraine, but not with the moo-moo, with beautiful purple on.
Oh, he used to
That's
complain to me
true.
that all the ladies would be all.
That's right.
Say, you know, and I would say, well, at least they're paying attention to what they look like. That's a positive.
Absolutely,
that's
yeah.
a very positive, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, shall we begin?
I'm ready.
Let us start with the blessing first, and then we can have a little comment from the rabbi. I'm anxious to hear about his trip to Mexico.
Me too.
Okay, shall we begin?
Yes.
Ata Adonai,
Elohim
Elohim
melech haolam,
Share Kirishano, Mitzvah,
Blessed are you.
Adonai Adonai,
You have sanctified us with your commandments.
Commanded us and engaged in the words of Torah.
Okay.
We need a conductor so we are all on the same word. Otherwise,
I know.
it becomes babble.
Oh, Rabbi, it's all yours, my friend.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay.
Oh,
Oh, we got a different one today.
Skinny's here tonight.
Skinny was asking
Skinny.
for
Hi,
attention.
Skinny.
So he says he's not too interested in Torah study, but it's the best program on at the moment. Welcome to everyone. Hello, Cy. Hello, Bernie. Hello, Lorraine. Hello, Evelyn. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Yes, I survived. I was in the midst of the conflict between the Sinaloa cartel and the Mexican army. How many people were at the service Friday night? I gave a little description toward the end of the service about the most prominent encounter that I had. They were burning up cars and buses, and but I had a good time and I got a lot of biking in and I feel I'm in better shape. So that when I was in the office this morning, I picked up a chocolate truffle
Ah,
with less guilt than I had previously. Today we are on the reading about Passover. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, both.
Um, Let me see.
The origins of the Pesach celebration.
Yes, does anybody know the page number on that?
29.
Okay,
29.
okay, so it's Perek Bet, Origins of the Pesach Celebration. And I had an article here about that, which I'm looking for. But this is, we all know what Passover is today and how we observe it, basically, correct?
Yes.
We all realize that this has ancient antecedents, that the Seder is based in large part upon components that go back to the Second Temple period. So, for example, the shank bone that's on the plate is a reminder of the Passover sacrifice that was offered in the temple, correct?
Yeah.
So the question is, but we also know that we're doing Torah study here, and Torah study is primarily about the Bible, and the Bible primarily, but not exclusively, goes back before the Second Temple, certainly, and even the First Temple. So the story of the kings of David and Solomon and Saul, not in that order, is in the book of Kings, which is part of the Hebrew Bible, but not the Torah. So if we're doing Torah study,
Why did I put it in there? Oh, it's better.
I'm sorry, Shirley, can you mute?
I got her.
Okay. Thank you. So if so everything in the Torah is before there was even a first temple. So the question is, what was Passover like? So the theory that some scholars have is that there was actually two separate holidays. One holiday emphasized is a sort of a magical holiday in which an animal was sacrificed as part of the crop, hope for prayer for good crops. And another one was a festival of matzot, which has to do with matzahs and with people who had no set land and who were just traveling around with their goats. So there were two separate holidays completely. And when the kings started, or at some point, maybe when King David and Solomon, or maybe later when King Josiah, which is about 600 BCE, there was a determined effort to combine these two separate holidays into one. So this would be equivalent today to, I don't know, taking, Valentine's Day and Thanksgiving and making it one holiday, or taking Hanukkah and Christmas and making one holiday, or I don't know what, taking Veterans Day and Memorial Day one holiday. Maybe much more radical than that, because those two really have pretty similar themes. So if this theory is obviously a very non-Orthodox theory. Now, if you're an Orthodox Jew, you would not accept that at all. And so that's why everyone here had to sign a written confidentiality clause that you will not tell the Rabbinic Association anything I'm telling you. Particularly if a third temple is built, and as a Kohen, I try to get a job there. I wouldn't want old Zoom recordings of these Torah studies to suddenly emerge and kibosh my efforts to become the high priest in the new temple. So that's just a brief introduction. There's obviously a lot more to say about this, but I don't want to overwhelm you with detail. But this is a very, very, very controversial issue. Any short, direct comments about that point? Yes, Bernie.
You took away my Hanukkah story from Sunday school. And now you're taking away my Passover story. Harvey Fields seems to be saying that the Seder predates slavery. And that's certainly counter to what I've always been taught, that the maror and the matzah, they all have significance from the Exodus, etc.
Right. Right. Now, the theory or theories that are propagated today are that both of these early holidays, one was called Chag HaMatzot, the holiday of Matzot, the other one was called Chag HaPesach, the holiday of Passover sacrifice. Neither one originally had anything to do with Egyptian slavery. But you didn't hear that, Bernie. I didn't say that.
Well, it's apparent in the Parsha reading that it was predating. So, but I mean, how did they come to give all this meaning to those holidays that had totally different meanings, and they switched it around and put them together, you know?
That's why the sages were so brilliant, and they were, and just, I guess it wasn't just the sages, I guess there was, you know, historical necessity. So for example, we're sitting here, we're a dozen people, and we're wondering why there was on the frost on the car windows. When I went, we had an outreach meeting at the temple this morning, 8 a.m. And I get in my car at 7:58 because I live so far from the temple, and my window is completely frosted out over. All right, so this is an unknown phenomenon in
Arizona.
Well, in Southern Arizona,
From the Phoenix area.
yes.
we are now trying to make sense of something we're unfamiliar with, and we take an existing holiday and we adapt it. So now part of the Passover story becomes how the slaves in Egypt left Egypt really early when there was frost on the windows of their what my point here is that as people's physical and psychological realities change, there's a need for existing holidays or prayers or celebrations or commemorations to respond to what we're worried about, what we're concerned about, or what we're happy about. And as these things change, the meaning of the holidays need to change, and either slowly or quickly, it frequently does that. Yeah, yes, Riva.
Yeah, my guess would be, and you gave a hint of that when you said there might be an existing holiday. My guess would be that just as there are harvest holidays throughout the world, there might be a spring planting kind of holiday all over the world. And this might fit into that agenda. There might have been people in the region where the Jews were living who had some kind of spring festival. And this might have been picked up by the Jews and reconfigured.
Yes, correct. Marcia.
Well, there are a lot of holidays that, yes, what Reva's saying, that not specifically to be able to be translated into Passover, but a lot of them revolve around the sun, whether it's a solstice holiday or a worship of the sun or something like that. There's a lot of holidays that were reworked into different religions of different sorts, you know. And even the Christmas holiday, there were other holidays around Christmas time that wound up being, because the date of Christmas is kind of floats around, it's ambiguous, it's not really correctly Jesus's birthday, etc., etc. So
Well,
that stuff,
It came in with the winter solstice, which, you know,
Right,
December
right.
21st. And so that was always celebrated. And so it became logical to combine those holidays.
right.
Well,
So this,
but we see,
yeah,
we-
sorry, Evelyn.
yeah. we see holidays that have been changed just in my lifetime, shall we say. When I was a youngster, Halloween was a nothing holiday, and it has been now become a reason for everyone to celebrate, just as Valentine's Day has become a secular holiday. It was originally a Catholic holiday celebrating St. Valentine's, and now it's become a love fest. So, it's holidays change over the culture. And so they have different meanings. Within 50 years, the holiday doesn't have the same significance, or it's been transmuted into something completely different. What I don't understand is if the holiday of the matzah was celebrated before Passover, why was it celebrated? Presumably, it was because the Hebrews didn't have time to bake leavened bread. So we know that matzah, that unleavened bread, existed ever since man learned how to use grains and make bread out of it. So I just don't understand why or how matzah became special during the Passover period. It's logical that it did, but why was it special before?
There's a short article in Haaretz in English, which I can send you if you send me an email, anyone. I'll be happy to email it to you after the class today, in which the journalist very briefly summarizes these two holidays. But I'll just read you a little bit from what he says. The origin of the matzah holiday, Chag HaMatzot, which is the holiday of the matzot. On the other hand, first he talked about Chag HaPesach. On the other hand, was celebrated by the settled segment of Israelite society, saying the two holidays were celebrated by different groups within the Israelites, one that was still wandering around and one that was settled. The Matzot was the settled, who lived in villages and who drew their subsistence from farming. For them too, spring was crucial, meaning the start of the harvest of the cereals on which they depended. Of the cereals grown by the ancient Israelites in this period, the first grain to be ready for harvest was barley. Although this made for inferior bread, it was highly prized. Not rarely by the spring harvest, the last year's stores had already been depleted and hunger took grip of the land. This new bread would have been unleavened, as the leavening used at the time was a portion of dough set aside from the last batch of bread. But this would have been unavailable due to the gap created by the empty stores. Add to this the fact that barley flour hardly rises anyway, and the baking techniques at the time would have made even the superior bread made of wheat flour flat and hard, and you've got matzah. When hungry, even matzah is a cause for celebration, and one could imagine that the communal threshing grounds were filled with joy, cheer, and jubilation. All right, Evelyn, what do you think?
Sounds logical to me. I can't disagree with anything that he said. It makes sense.
In 20 seconds, you went from being you said just about 20 seconds ago that it's hard to imagine a justification for celebrating matzah other than the freedom from slavery, and you've been
well, I in a sense I could say I misspoke, because as I stated before, that we know that unleavened bread did exist ever since man has been growing grain and making bread, and it was inevitable. But why was it so special at Passover? What made the matzah for unleavened bread existed long before Passover became an event in the Torah. In other words, long before the Exodus. Then why was matzah considered a special item for that particular holiday when it existed before?
I have a question.
Yes, so, and
Was there leavened bread then?
He's trying to give an explanation for that exact phenomenon. And he's saying that it has to do with, was the beginning of the harvest. There was no other substance to make bread from. And so they were very happy for the matzah.
So they had leavening at the time of the Passover. There was actually leavening.
But in this particular scenario, the leavening used was made from some of the bread products that hadn't been come to ripening yet. So
It was yeast. They
I
made,
understand, but it was their yeast. That's what I'm saying. Did they have?
there's always yeast. There's always this, all you have to do is just put flour and water out, leave it exposed to the air, and you will get a starter in a couple of days because the yeast that's in the air will begin to ferment. It was the timing that made it impossible. If
Right,
they had to,
right.
if they had to leave in a hurry, then they couldn't wait for it to rise.
I
Chef
understand
Evelyn.
that, but I'm saying there was, I don't know what they ate then back then, but I'm saying, so they weren't just eating pita bread and whatever version of a flatbread that there was leavened bread in Egyptian times.
Good. Sai, comment? This is up your alley, I would think. Nothing right now, Lorraine?
Yes, my husband's one of the unusual people that absolutely loves to eat matzah all year long. Yehuda matzah. And we find it is wonderful, according to him. I haven't tried it, but he does enjoy it. So I guess there are people, the store wouldn't stock it all over the year, all over the calendar.
Matzah is very good all year round.
Thank you.
And Yehuda, gefilte fish is the best gefilte fish.
Right.
Okay, so Minya?
Yes.
Comment?
No,
Okay,
thank you.
okay. Steve?
Well, the starter, like, sourdough bread, it's essentially the same thing.
That's right.
Um, And, I'm just speculating that there was formation, because they did have some type of beer or
Right.
some type
Yeah.
of alcohol besides wine. So they had
They had hops.
They
They
had
had
hops.
hops.
and other grains to reduce that. So yeah, I would say so. Yeah, I would say it was evident.
Now you can imagine if this theory is correct, and you have one holiday that is celebrated by Israelite wanderers who are wandering around, who don't have permanent homes, and a second holiday that is celebrated by people who are settled and are agriculturally focused. Merging these two holidays into one is not just a question of merging the holidays, it's a question of merging these two groups. And you'll notice throughout the Torah that there are references to all sorts of different groups. And in large part, the Torah is an effort to try to unify the distinctive groups. We don't really have that in our temple. I mean, everybody comes from their own background, but it's not like we've got really 2 or 3 distinctive groups. It's not like we've got a group of itinerants who don't have houses and another group that does, or something like that. So, this is an effort to create a common culture, a common religion, because as you see, they're both, at least called in Haaretz's version, Israelites, but if they have completely different holidays, are they really part of the same group? Is it the same religion? Is it the same social group? I would say it's very hard to argue that they are. I mean, I don't know. Well, let's take a look. Page 29, Perek Bet, origins of the Pesach celebration. Who'd like to start us off by reading?
Okay, I will. Origins of the Pesach celebration. Pesach is one of the most popular celebrations of the Jewish year. On the evening of the 14th day of Nisan, families and friends gather for the Seder. The table is festively decorated with holiday symbols, or calling the Pesach Zeroa, a roasted shank bone or chicken neck, the matzah, unleavened bread, the maror, bitter herb, the haroset, a mixture of apples, nuts, honey, cinnamon, and wine, and the hagiga, betzah, roasted egg, the karpas, parsley, a cup of wine, and 1 cup of wine set aside for Elijah. At each place is a Haggadah, a book containing the Seder or order of the evening service, and the story of the Jewish people's liberation from Egypt. Those celebrating the Seder will drink 4 cups of wine, invite a child to recite 4 questions, and read about the 4 different children representing 4 attitudes to the Pesach festival. Near the beginning of the banquet, a matzah will be broken, and half of it will be set aside as the afikomen, or dessert. Holding a piece of matzah, sometimes at an open door, the leader of the Seder will say, "Let all who are hungry come and eat." The retelling of the Exodus from Egypt will include songs and discussion, and a reminder from the rabbis of the Mishnah, who said, "In every generation, a Jew is to see himself or herself as though he or she were escaping from Egypt." The Haggadah also contains the story of 5 famous rabbis who extended their celebration from early evening until the break of dawn the next morning. The festive meal concludes with the words, "L'shana habana b'Yerushalayim," next year in Jerusalem. What modern Jews celebrate as a Seder actually evolved over thousands of years. Each generation added important elements to the ceremony while abandoning others. Within our Torah portion, we find important descriptions of the first Pesach rituals observed by the people of Egypt. At springtime in ancient times, before the enslavement of Hebrews in Egypt, shepherds set aside a year-old lamb for each household. At twilight on the 14th day of the month of Nisan, when the moon was full and bright, and the lamb was slaughtered, its blood was smeared on the doorposts of the houses where it would be eaten, and it was then roasted for a festival feast. When the meat was ready, it was eaten with matzah and maror. Early Hebrew farmers also observed a spring festival. Their custom included removing all leavened products from their houses and eating only matzah for 7 days, from the 14th day until the 21st day of the month of Nisan.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Evelyn. So basically, Harvey Fields says exactly what this article in Haaretz says, even though this book was written 40, 50 years ago, the theory doesn't seem to have changed. So you see there's 2 groups. There's the shepherds and there's the farmers. And the shepherds have one religion, one holiday, and the farmers have another. What they have in common is basically that it's celebrated in the springtime. That's about it. And then the rest, as they say, is history. Quick directed comments, Lorraine or Donna or Riva.
Yeah, I think the smearing of the lamb's blood on the doorpost is particularly interesting, considering that it preceded the Exodus from Egypt story, because it says that people were putting lamb's blood on doorposts for another reason at a much earlier period.
Right. And so, but something you do can be given another reason. So
it had an earlier tradition.
I slow down at a certain point in the road because there's a hole in the road. There's like and the tire could fall in the hole.
Right.
They then repair the road, but I still slow down because I'm used to slowing down. And then a new reason comes up and we start to say we slow down at that point to pay respect to the spirits or something else. So you come up with new reasons for things that you're already observing. Babette, Shirley, Steve.
I do have one request, though. Make sure everyone raises their hands and speak at one time. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yes, teacher.
Okay. Bernie? No, okay. Okay, Evelyn, back to you.
Okay, where did I leave off? Oh, early. Is that where I left off?
At springtime?
In springtime. Oh. Well, no, I think I read that.
No one knows.
Early Hebrew.
Early Hebrew
Hebrew.
farmers also observed a spring festival. Their custom included removing all leavened products from their houses and eating only matzah for 7 days, from the 14th day until the 21st day of the month of Nisan. I have a question about that after I finish. No one knows when the two traditions of shepherds and farmers were combined. That may have occurred at the time Moses liberated the Jewish people from Egyptian bondage or later. All accounts of the festival within the Torah link it to the historic moment of the Exodus. For instance, we are told that the lamb is to be called the Pesach sacrifice because God passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt when the Egyptians were killed. The Torah also contains instructions about eating the lamb. It is to be eaten quickly while each male stands with a staff in his hand, sandals on his feet, and a girdle around his waist. That's basically a belt. The dress and dramatic posture of those escaping danger, fleeing for their lives. All these strange customs were meant to capture the attention of young people. When they saw the lamb killed, its blood painted on the doorposts, their fathers dressed as if they were about to leave on a journey, standing with a staff in their hands and quickly eating the roasted meat, it was hoped that they would ask, "What are you doing? What is the meaning of this strange ceremony?" In answer, fathers were to tell their children how God liberated them from Egyptian slavery. This early ceremony was known as Seder Mitzrayim, or the Seder of Egypt, because it records the early history and rituals of Pesach. The rabbis named the celebration that evolved over the centuries Seder Dorot, or the Seder of the generations. Seder Dorot includes many of the old traditions, though they have been changed to meet new circumstances.
Okay, thank you, Evelyn. So Harvey Fields is mixing up two things here that I would wish he wouldn't mix up. One is the origin of these two holidays, and the other is the development of the Passover Seder. But he's mixing them up, so we're stuck. But basically now what he's saying is that you have these two holidays. You also have written or not written memories of the rituals that developed over the course of time. And what we have as a Haggadah has a long prehistory, that there were things spoken about and things perhaps written down in short form that, eventually developed into the Haggadah that we have. And the earlier forms of Haggadahs that were quite different. Marcia and then Evelyn.
I could see as we were reading this and talking about it, how if younger people were considering the matzah and the escape from Egypt, that their interpretation of what matzah is about and the blood on the doors was about would change even if it was folkloric, even if they are making it up as they go along, what they are remembering is not what their parents are remembering historically, but what they experienced. And so their story is different than the previous generation's story.
Yeah. And eventually it changed. And when you think of the men standing, gulping down their lamb, whereas in our time, we lean on a cushion and recline as if we are the nobility of the Roman times, because they reclined and therefore we likened ourselves to them. So customs for the Seder obviously have evolved and changed over the centuries, the millennia. It's really quite fascinating, because in the beginning it was only matzah and lamb. And so you had the addition of the symbolism of the parsley, the maror for the bitter herbs as a remembrance of bad times. These things all had to have evolved over many, many, many years. And so the original Seder just isn't the same as the one that we celebrate today. The event is, maybe the intent of the event is the same, but the ritual has changed, as all rituals do over time.
Yeah, I would say that even the intent probably is very different, probably. But everything else Evelyn said is 100%. Steve.
Well, you have to keep in mind too, the commercialization of Passover, of this particular holiday. It's changed dramatically, as you said, but it is commercialized now, more so than anything else. Same thing with Hanukkah.
Well, so is every holiday.
Well, that's
When I-
true, but it's
When I was a
gotta
kid,
make money, I guess.
yeah, well, that's right. When I was a kid, holiday was a very insignificant, truly insignificant holiday. It was a minor holiday. My mother lit Hanukkah candles, and I remember receiving 1 penny because it was the Depression. So that was all they could give me as Hanukkah gelt, and it was a nothing holiday. It just, and look what's happened. It was in competition with Christmas, and that's why it has evolved to the degree that it has. So Pesach probably, maybe it competed with Easter. I don't know.
I was not aware that there were 2 holidays that came together for Pesach. And I'm interested in following this. I'm interested in knowing when they came together and what was included from each one of them and what was left out of each holiday when it came together to make Pesach.
And Harvey Fields suggests here that the 2 holidays may have come together as far away as the Exodus from Egypt, which would be 3rd century BCE. The sources, more recent sources that I've read, suggest it happened no earlier than the time of the kings of David and Solomon, and probably as late as King Josiah, which would be about 600 BCE. So Harvey Fields dates the unification of these 2 holidays 600 or 700 years earlier than I would, but that's okay. But yeah, remember also that Chag HaMatzot is very much based on it's a magical holiday, and that's why you put the blood on the doorpost. It's designed to ward off evil, and particularly a bad crop. And so, I'm sorry, not a bad crop, anything that might happen to the livestock. This was a holiday, Pesach was a holiday for those who were, herding animals and had no fixed location, and that they were hoping to ward off evil. So yeah, it was not about consumerism. It was about fear of something bad happening, a disease that might kill half your flock, something like that was seen as evil. So they were very determined, to celebrate it in order to hopefully keep anything bad from happening. That was a very, very high motivation. You wouldn't forget about the holiday like you might today, because then, if half your goats died, you'd feel responsible. Marsha, Donna, Bernie?
Just it.
I think the fact that you're saying it may have come about so much later, King David, etc., that does give weight to the fact that it's what you're remembering. And so the thing that would stick out would be the escape from Egypt, rather than just, it's going to be a good year for the crops or the sheep or whoever, So you would commemorate the events that happened that were most memorable, and that's going to be the Exodus.
Mhm.
So you'd have those two holidays to work with to, let's put it together and, whatever.
Okay. Babette? Shirley, Donna? Riva? Sai? Yes, Evelyn.
All right, it just seems to me that what we are discussing is the evolution of and the development of a religion, essentially. It starts, yes, these historical events were recorded in one place or another, or told orally and then later written down. But in order to make a cohesive religion and combining the different viewpoints, the different tribes, to get them to think the same way, you had to evolve all of these stories in order to combine everyone to think along the same lines. And so it was a work in progress, for lack of a better word, to describe these stories and what they mean to the Jewish people. To me, it's the evolution of a religion, essentially. Am I wrong?
No,
I
you're
think
right.
that's fascinating. That's very fascinating. I'd never thought of it in that line, but yes.
Sai? No? Okay. Bernie? Okay. All right, back to you, Evelyn. We were reading at the bottom of 30, I think. Top of 30. Yeah, the
Page
top of
30.
For instance,
Let's see. Where were we? I'm
for
sorry.
instance, at
For
the
instance.
bottom,
Okay, the bottom of 30.
Oh, for instance, okay. For instance, emphasis is still placed upon the festive family meal and upon the importance of eating matzah for 7 days. Maror is still eaten as a reminder of the bitterness of slavery. All that is left of the Pesach lamb, however, is a roasted shank bone placed on the Seder plate and at the appropriate moment in the ceremony held up by the leader, who explains that it is a reminder of God saving the Israelite firstborn on the night when all of the Egyptian firstborn were killed.
Okay, stop. I mean, the 10 plagues, and particularly the last plague, always struck me as quite barbaric, right? If you've got this power struggle between Moses and perhaps his uncle by marriage, the new Pharaoh, they probably knew each other from before, from family occasions. They'd been at the Thanksgiving dinner together. Do they really have to involve all these other people? Why should the average Egyptian, like a carpenter or a shoemaker or a storekeeper or a honey maker or whatever, why should they suffer for basically what's a political struggle involving the government? I mean, I guess you could say the same thing about Russia. Why should the average Russian and the average Ukrainian suffer for what is essentially a political struggle between the political elites of Russia and Ukraine? The Putin and his friends think that the Ukrainians should be part of their group, And the Ukrainians said, well, now, ever since the fall of the Soviet Union, we want to be part of our own group. And the Russians don't like that, but this is this is 20, 30, 40 Russians and 20, 30, 40 Ukrainians, but they're making everyone in both sides of the border suffer for something that really is a conflict. Same thing here. Let Moses and the Pharaoh, why don't they have a wrestling match or a duel or whatever they want? Just the two of them. Why do you have to make all these other people suffer and die? Firstborn Egyptians, all of them die. All the poor frogs and the locusts and all these other animals, why should they die? The Nile turned red and all these Egyptians can't drink the water. It's all terrible. Bernie, Marcia, and then whoever else.
But this is very common. You could say the same thing about wars. Why don't the generals do like David and Goliath did and just have a champion, and whoever wins that battle wins the war?
Right.
Mhm. Right.
People make money, that's why, from war.
So, Bernie, you're done?
Yes, Marcia.
So that's why, as you were talking, or before you said it, I was saying to myself, and this is why the Russians are bombing the apartment houses in Ukraine, because they're making the people at the lower end suffer, because it has to do with that, going back to Pharaoh hardening his heart business, and so the only way Pharaoh's going to change his mind is if he's got a lot of backlash from the people below. And also the firstborn are going to consider, his own children are going to be considered in there.
But this is exactly, I disagree with you, Marcia, 180 degrees, because it's exactly in an authoritarian society that you do not have pressure, significant pressure from the people or from the press. So in Putin's case, let's say, Putin does not get pressured by the people because he's insulated from the people. He can do basically what he wants as long as he has the support of the 40 or 50 elite around him in the government and another 200 or 300 who run the economy and so forth. And these people are dependent on him. They were probably placed in their positions by him, and he can cut them off economically if he wants to. So although he's reliant upon them in a sense, he is also the one dictating their success. So therefore, you do not have any checks and balances.
But on the Ukrainian side, though, there's pressure on Zelensky
All right, yeah.
because of the people who are being hurt in Ukraine.
Okay, yes, I see that. So, but in the going back to Egypt, the Pharaoh can do whatever he wants. He doesn't have to stand for re-election. So,
But he has a firstborn son.
oh, okay.
I think whoever is in charge, if the price becomes too high, at that point, there is capitulation. Until that price becomes too high, they will continue. And so until the price became too high for Pharaoh, with the loss not only of the firstborn, but his crops, the people suffering, it had gotten to the point where rather than see the destruction of the entire culture and society, he had to capitulate at that point. And this is typical in any war, I think.
So it's hard to reach that point. Sai.
Sai, we cannot hear you.
Saying never mind.
Yeah.
Okay,
on.
Sai, you don't want to, yeah, I think he's unmuted now, isn't he?
Can you try again, Sai?
Tony, is that you there? Can you unmute him?
He is
He's not
unmuted.
muted.
Who's unmuted?
Something with this, something's wrong.
Okay. Sorry, Sai. Bernie? Okay. Donna?
when you're speaking of like Pharaoh, he was in charge, he made the decisions, but that's the way it is in countries. I can look back at World War II because I slightly remember that time. And it was when Hawaii was bombed by the Japanese that we got into that war. But the decision to go into that war was made by Roosevelt. I'm not sure how much the Congress had to do with that. I was a small child at that time, but that's where. And then the country of the United States was at war. And even though most people, we did not go to Japan, we did not go to Europe to fight, but we were involved in it because we had relatives that died in these places. And so these wars become something that influence all the people that live in that country because of their relatives that could be fighting in that war.
Donna,
Yes.
I disagree with you that we didn't send people there. We did once we declared
Yes, we did.
war.
Yes.
Then
Yeah.
we did send our soldiers overseas, and so yeah, that was when we
Yeah.
were forced to become. Before we were sending Britain and Europe armaments, but then when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, then we had no choice but to declare war. Roosevelt was forced to declare war at that point because then we were lucky in that period when our own shores were never actually attacked. In other words, there may have been German U-boats along the coast of New England, but at the same time, none of them ever landed, and we were never actually invaded. We never had German planes flying over the US. We were over there as such. Heaven help us in the next war, that won't be true, but well, that's another.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't mean we didn't send people. We did, but it was also the people that didn't go that suffered here. And also in England, I know before we got into that war as a country, we had quite a few of our pilots that were there flying with the Royal Air Force.
Royal Air Force, yeah.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
Passover a story commemorating a war? Is that what we're talking about here, that we won the war against the Egyptian pharaoh?
God helped us win the war against. It was, in a sense, it was a conflict. I won't, war designates something else, but it was definitely a conflict. And so
a military conflict, a political military conflict that did not escalate to the point of Russia. Sai, you can talk. No, okay. Marcia.
All right, this is my real sticky point in the Torah for me, is God's involvement in this whole story. The hardening of God's heart, of Pharaoh's heart by God, okay? And so it's like God is pushing for the Jewish people to get out of Egypt, and the one way he's going to get them out is to force Pharaoh's hand. And so the story escalates and escalates until the Israelis just leave, and they are pushed to that point. So this part of the story just confuses me. I'm sorry, but it does. I mean, you've got man's free will, and then you have the story of God made Pharaoh do it.
Okay, that's a separate topic, of course, about the hardening of Pharaoh's hearts. And
But we're going to go right past it, I think.
Yeah, we're not dealing with that. We dealt with that a few years ago. And now that more of us have hardening the arteries, we don't want to remind ourselves that we can't do truffles like we used to. But that's a separate topic that we're going to avoid today because we don't want to talk about it.
Okay.
But what do you think about this political military conflict idea? Is that the main point here? Have we because we talked about the two holidays. One has for the farmers, it was about, you know, having an early part of the crop, which saved them from starvation. For the shepherds, it was about a magical holiday that would hopefully push away evil spirits. Have we dropped both of these aspects or purposes of the holiday completely? Yes, Riva.
You have to unmute.
Thank you. Thinking about the purpose of the story, I think that that this is an origin story, and it's essential if you want to have a people who stay unified and share their identity as a people. And so I noticed the first sentence on page 30 on the right-hand side, first full paragraph, it says, all these strange customs were meant to capture the attention of young people. So I think this is a story with lots of drama and interesting show and tell elements, and good food that helped create a separate people.
Mhm.
That's what I said. Evolution of a religion.
Right, exactly. I agree. For me, it's an origin story, and you have to have these elements if you want to perpetuate the people, particularly if part of this is written at a time before there really is any kind of homeland.
Mhm. And that's a very controversial thing. In my view, there was already homeland. In Harvey Field's view, there was not. Marcia.
Well, I was going to say, we keep saying in our congregation, if you feed them, they will come. So, right? So if we sit them down to a dinner and let's talk about it kind of thing, then, we're talking about it's a reminder, a yearly reminder of what we're all about. And, even more so in some ways than Hanukkah, and then high holidays rather.
Yeah, yeah.
If we provided a very elaborate Hilton-style buffet brunch, we would get more people at Torah Study.
If you put locks on the table, they will come.
Come.
We've got 11 here right now. You think we could increase it to 22 with lox and bagels?
Yeah.
Definitely.
You forget.
And Yehuda
bagels.
matzah.
I'm telling you.
All right, no bagels. We'll do lox and Yehuda matzah.
And
There you
matzah,
go.
You
right.
gotta have the
With a
bacon.
smear of cream cheese.
Yeah, there should be-
Right.
Any other perspectives on this? Like, so the question I'm asking is, you have the wanderers, the shepherds, doing a magical ritual. You have the farmers saying thanks for the early part of the crop that kept them from starvation. Have these elements, these purposes, these holidays been dropped? And if so, what are we celebrating today that's different? And can you just change the meaning of the holiday totally without ramifications? Don't we have some obligation to preserve the part of the original intent of the holiday, or no? Lorraine?
Well, the part of Passover Seder that always disturbed me was when we always said, after we were all seated and the food was served, let those that are hungry join us or come in or whatever. And I used to, as a little kid, go, you mean I'm supposed to go out in the street and find someone who looks hungry and invite them in? Why aren't we doing some kind of an effort through the schools, through the synagogues, weeks in advance to look for people that won't have anywhere to go? And I think that has changed. I think we do try a little bit. Remember, I said try to make an effort to make it known that we are having a meal and we would like to have you come.
Well, we have a community Seder every year, so that is open,
Also, be careful what you wish for. In Los Angeles,
Yeah.
they fed the homeless. So they showed up in droves.
That's true.
Was it wrong really, though?
Well, they were, if because I go there a lot. Yes, they came with their problems too, and their drug abuse and violence followed. You feed them, they'll show up, but then you can't get rid of them.
Do you want, well, that happens in congregation. You want to get rid of them when they show up at temple?
Riva,
Yeah, at least in my family, and I suppose in many families, Passover was the one holiday in the entire year where our extended family got together. And I think one of the things that's positive about this holiday is that people who have become unaffiliated with any kind of Jewish institution, many of them still celebrate or go or attend at least a Seder. And so I think this is one of the opportunities to reach out to those unaffiliated people who might, if they saw what else was available at the temple, might consider it as a possibility for joining. So I think Passover is an important holidays for many of us because it reminds us of a rich history we've had with extended family, many of whom are now gone.
But that's one free meal, not feeding them for a lifetime, It's one freebie to get a peek into our way of doing things. We're not using Christian blood, that kind of thing to destroy myths. But one meal is different from opening your table 24/7.
okay. Harvey Fields now moves into some elements of the Seder. I would have preferred that he deal with this in a separate essay. I think he's mixing three separate topics in one little thing, but that's what he does. So I guess we'll go with it. Evelyn, you willing to keep going? We're at the very bottom of page 30 on the right-hand side.
Okay. Each according to his or her ability. The rabbis point out that 4 times the Torah mentions the questions that children will ask on the evening of Pesach. 3 of the questions are found in the Torah portion, Bo, Exodus 12, etc., and 1 is found
That's the
in
week, that's
Deuteronomy.
our parsha this week.
One explanation of the 4 different questions is that they represent 4 different kinds of human abilities to listen and to learn. When God spoke to Israel, the rabbis teach, each person heard according to his or her ability. The elders, the children, the babies, the young, even Moses, each understood what God was saying according to his or her capacity to listen.
Okay, stop.
Yeah.
Comments, Babette? How does your capacity to listen differ from that of Riva or Shirley or Steve?
Well, I think it depends on your background, really, and your education, It depends what you bring to the table also.
All right. Anyone else? Ability to listen, to hear?
Yeah, well, the ability to listen and discern what someone is saying, I think depends upon one's own capabilities, mental capabilities, intelligence, but also one's own background, because someone from one walk of life may hear a pronouncement and think of it in one way, and someone else hearing it from another walk of life will hear it differently. So that if someone is listening to a lecturer, depending on whether it's a military man, a philosopher, a housewife, or whatever, if they're listening to one particular speech, each one will interpret it according to their own knowledge and ability to interpret what that person is saying. So you get one comment, but you get 4 different opinions because each one is looking at it through a different eye, shall we say.
Absolutely. absolutely.
It's
Uh,
It's interesting also in Israel, because there we have a large complement of Russians, of North Africans,
Oh.
of Saudi Arabians that were Jews that got out, Iraqi Jews, of course, American Jews, European Jews, and they all bring something different
Yeah,
to the Seder.
Well, and they don't hear each other, right? So
yes,
Right, a lot, yes, that's
the new
true.
government is, from many of the Moroccan Jews' perspective, finally protecting Israel's basic security needs. From a point of view of some of the more westernized Jews, it's trampling over judicial independence and just, harming or even destroying democracy. So the way that different groups see priorities and have different perspectives and are sensitive to different questions can vary enormously. And how do you make the different groups understand the different points of view of the other group? And you have leaders or more intellectual people in each group who can do that in small levels, but when you get the masses, it becomes much harder to do that. Steve.
Okay, I always was taught that we were encouraged to ask questions during the Seder, whether you were the firstborn, secondborn, thirdborn, whatever. They were always encouraged to ask questions about the Seder. And that's all I have to the table.
So but I guess here they're saying that if different people can listen only on certain levels, I guess the questions won't matter if nobody can hear each other's point, right? So you can ask questions and get answers, but if you can't understand the emotions underlying those questions and answers, it may not mean that much, right? So it's kind of a different level. So, but the questions are important. And I guess in a family structure where you have children or relatives or friends, you assume that there's a common emotional perspective, or there's that you can make you get each other, and then the questions can provide information. I don't know if that makes any sense.
yeah, on a small level, on a more intimate level, it's easier to get a consensus. On the greater level, with the divergence of attitudes, opinions, beliefs, whatever it is, it's hard, as you were pointing out in Israel, when you have so many different cultures, having Judaism as a common religion, however, they bring their culture with them. And that is where it becomes more difficult to reconcile with each other, I think. My opinion.
Well, Donna lived there, so she comes with a good, an opinion, a knowledgeable opinion.
Yeah.
How many years were you there, Donna?
Yes, what?
How many years?
How many? 26.
26 years in Tiberias.
And the people that we celebrated Pesach with was basically American, English-speaking Jews.
Mhm. And there's a certain commonality that is important for any religious practice. Okay, Evelyn, back. Marcia, and then back.
I lost the connection there for a while, but at the point that I lost it, Reva, I think, may be the only person who will understand. I am reading the book that you read in book club a couple of months ago, and there's a Passover. It's called Three Daughters. It's by Letty Pogobrin, and there's a Passover scene in the book that brings the whole disparate family together in such a great way. The person who led the Seder was able to ask questions, have them ask questions, have in such a way that it made a family that was having a lot of problems kind of pull together. And so I think a Seder can do that. I think the fact that you can tailor it to have people be able to talk about their problems through the Seder's Haggadah ceremony was really kind of great, you know.
Okay, back to you. The difference between
The difference between the wicked child and the wise child. The wise child asks, what do the laws and traditions that God has commanded you mean? The wicked child asks, what does this ritual service mean to you? What is the difference between them? It has been suggested that the wise children ask the reason for the various types of rituals, while the wicked children do not care about the meanings of the ceremony. For them, the festival is merely a burden God has imposed upon the Jewish people year after year. Nahama Leibowitz points out that the real difference between the wise and wicked children is not in their words, but in the introductions to their questions within the Haggadah. We are told that the wise child will ask you, and that the wicked child will say to you. It is the attitude of each that makes the difference. So long as a child asks, no matter how difficult the questions are, it is a sign that he expects an answer. He is far from being malicious, but is a student thirsty for knowledge. The wicked one, however, does not ask and desires no reply. His attitude is fixed and predetermined. He is not interested in your answers only, but what he will say to you. In other words, don't confuse me with the facts. My mind is made up.
Do you agree with this? That it's that maybe it's a little bit exaggerated, but that the wicked child or the wicked person just kind of tells you, doesn't ask you? Does that make a difference?
I don't like the use of the word wicked. I don't think it's proper here. I think narrow-minded, obstinate, or something, a phrase like that would be more appropriate. Wicked intimates something that is immoral or damaging to everybody.
Damaging, like not just a little bit, but wicked is somebody goes in and shoots 100 people in a post office kind of thing.
Yes, that to me is wicked.
All right, so we'll change the word from appropriately sensitive child to somebody who's kind of abrasive, narrow-minded, and obstinate child. But do you agree that makes a big difference, that the one asks and the other tells?
Well, make a difference in how? I don't understand what you mean.
The fundamental difference between a good child and a bad child, that one asks and one tells. I mean, when I was little, I knew more about it than my family. So from a fairly early age, they turned things over to me, and they wanted, me to tell them. They didn't want me to ask them too much because they didn't really know, I guess. Bernie.
Well, at least the kid who's not the good one is participating. He hasn't walled himself off.
Yeah.
And he's probably hearing what they're saying. He just doesn't want to get into it.
He doesn't listen.
Sai.
Can you hear me, first of all?
Yes.
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 Oh, that's great. Well, I was going to bring up the fact that the advancement in the world comes about by people who ask questions, who are not happy with what the situation is, who always want to find out more. Now, certainly these are not wicked people. It's my consensus is the people who are willing to accept everything that's told to them are the people who are not the thinkers. I think that in order for the world to move ahead, you've got to inquire, you got to question, and you got to move ahead.
Okay. Good. And we hear you loud and clear. Riva, Lorraine, and Evelyn.
Okay.
I love the idea that if you're presenting something to a group of people, you have to recognize that they learn in different ways, that they understand in different ways, they have different levels of intellect, of maturity, of emotional, whatever. And so if you really want to get a message across, convey it in a multiple ways. And I think that's a beautiful message.
Okay, Lorraine.
Yeah, I agree with Riva on that. I also feel that we are very quick to label children as the stupid child. Oh, he's so shy. 5, 6 years of hearing he's shy, guess what? He'll become a shy child because that's the expectation of his family, his friends, whatever. So I think we have to be careful of that.
Yeah. Well,
Evelyn?
okay, going back to Sai, the fact that our religion is unique and in that it expects people to question. I have a set of books at home called The Jewish Book of Why. Why is this and why is that? Because you're expected to question everything about the religion and ask why, and presumably you will get help and a logical answer as to why we do certain things or why we believe, as opposed to other religions that say, do as I say, don't question me. And so in this respect, Judaism, I think Jews have more open minds and are more questioning. And this is why you have so many Jewish Nobel Prize winners, because they do question, they do inquire, and they do wonder why, and go ahead and actually contribute more to humanity as a result. So from that standpoint, yay for the Jews.
Babette, and then Bernie.
Unmute Bernie.
Oh, excuse me.
Babette, and then
Oh.
Bernie.
Oh, well, the thing is, we're kind of talking about extremes, you know? There's a whole middle of the road where people are open to questioning or understanding or have an open heart. But there are a small, hopefully small amount of people who are sociopaths.
What?
Sociopaths,
Oh,
okay?
thank you.
They're in the minority, but they do a lot of damage in
Yeah.
the world,
Yeah.
you know? So you want to try to capture people who have an open mind and can learn. I mean, like, I don't know how many angels we have, you know, we do, but there's a section of people who are sociopaths who there's no getting to. They are hell-bent on that, you know. I mean, whether we're talking about Putin or Hitler or whatever, they're sociopaths. You cannot change their mind or stop them.
Yeah, and the goals that they want are frequently very difficult for the rest of us to understand.
It's malevolent.
They want to recreate the world in a certain way that they think is better, but it's hard for most of us to imagine why that would be so much better.
You know, we want to reach out to people with open minds and hearts.
Okay, Bernie.
I have to beg to differ with Evelyn. I think she has excluded the entire Orthodox community when she talks about people who question.
I think they do question, but within their own group as such, and they don't have an open mind to the rest. But at the same time, they are the ones who are actually perpetuating our basic religion.
Yeah, by making babies. By making babies.
Yeah, right. But they're producing more Jews than the rest of us are, so. if we have one or two, that's a lot. They'll turn out at least a half a dozen to a dozen. And so, yeah, from that standpoint, and yet how many of them remain Orthodox? You always have a nucleus of them who break away. I think of the Amish, I think of the Mormons. When you have very strict hierarchy like that, you're always going to have some who don't adhere to it. It's
But they're not crooks and they're not in jail, not that there aren't any, but these people integrate in society. You know, that they even if they're in their own little group, they're not doing harm out there. You know, the greater
that's
good.
true. That's true.
You know,
Yeah.
and I understand that maybe they want to try to replace the 6 million, but these people, they're not Bernie Madoffs. You know.
Yeah.
Or the new Sam Bankman-Fried. With the
Yeah, unfortunately, they make the headlines and they tarnish the rest of the Jews, unfortunately. Well, so it goes. But
what was interesting with Sam Bankman-Fried is after he was discovered, he went and he did interviews with everyone trying to explain what he'd done. And what he explained, people said, this is criminal. But he believed that what he was doing was not criminal. And he didn't seem, even though both of his parents are professors of law, he didn't seem to understand that something can be illegal even though you don't think it's illegal. And so people have certain warped perceptions. Okay, but so I'd like to get Passover to get back to this magical, mystical element where we're trying to ward off evil spirits. So maybe this year for Passover, we should all take blood and a brush and paint the blood on our doorposts and carry around a goat and say the mystical incantations to get rid of all the evil spirits. We want to banish evil spirits from not only from all of the northwest part of our area, but also from the entire state, and get rid of these evil spirits. Do you think there's any hope to
No.
no, you can't do that in some city because they would object to having no domestic animals are allowed. So sorry, the goats are out.
And I would let my mezuzah do that.
But I guess, so you can't really restore the original meaning of these holidays, but do we need to recreate Passover yet again and make it a new holiday that represents new interests, or is it still motivating us emotionally in the same way? Bernie?
Well, at the very least, we ought to teach our children this story rather than the one that we were taught in Sunday school.
What story? What do you mean?
The evolution of the Seder and the evolution of the holiday, etc.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
But
one of the
is the
things,
meaning any different?
Say again?
Is the meaning of the holiday any different to change it from the basic story that goes back to the evolutionary, how you would perceive it today?
I just find it uncomfortable that I was taught the wrong story.
Well, you weren't taught the wrong story. You were taught the official story. Once things evolve in fundamentalist religion, you deny not only to others but to yourself that anything ever evolved. So the Orthodox will say that the way that we understand it today is the way it always was, and that's part of a fundamentalist religious perspective. Yes, Sai.
I think it's interesting that we have to note that particularly in this country, less people are believing in the story, whether it's a Jewish story or a Catholic story or a Protestant story. the story has less value as the years go by. And I think that it would be interesting to examine that situation, why all that is happening.
Well, clearly, all of the different religious mythology in the Western world is resonating much less with each passing year. There's articles almost every day in the paper about the decline of Christianity in the West. And so the stories that Christianity have been telling 50 or 100 years ago resonated more deeply with more people, much more deeply with much more people than it does today. And so there's no reason for us to think that Judaism is any different. And how many people here were raised in a fairly intense Jewish environment? How many people were raised in a fairly intense religious or cultural environment of any type?
Oh, yes. Mine was more cultural than,
Or something, not necessarily,
cultural.
but some sort of environment where, I don't know, your parents taught you North myths, or where there was some sort of intense culture going on. I would argue that people that are interested in religion today are people that were raised in an environment where there was something going on, you know, that the parents or the culture was of some sort was there. Maybe it was Christian, maybe it was North mythology, but it was something. And then as adults, we come to Judaism. People that are raised in a household where there was no intense interest in anything except for money or whatever are unlikely to become intensely interested in Judaism or any religion, because there's no history of any sort of intense interest in something.
I would disagree with you just on the basis of a few individuals that I've known who were raised in a secular home, and yet as they either met someone who was religious and married that person, or as the years evolved, they felt that something was missing in their lives, and they looked towards a religion. And some of them hooked onto Judaism, others hooked onto Catholicism, depending on what their exposure was. And so I feel that it's not true of everybody, but it is possible for someone who is a-religious to become religious later on.
So this is people who had no particular culture growing up of any sort.
That's right. That's right.
Interested in it through a series of life events. So there's something that makes them feel that they lack culture. But that's 1 out of 10, 1 out of 15, 1 out of 20. It's
small numbers, very small numbers.
People who are raised in the typical American upbringing, where the parents, maybe they're from two different religious backgrounds, but they're not really an intermarriage because neither one cares about their background or knows much about it. They have no culture. They're not talking about Aristotle. They're not talking about medieval history. They just earn a living. They go out to dinner. They talk about money and about careers and about sports. And that sort of environment is highly, highly unlikely to lead to any sort of sustained interest in Judaism or any religion later. You would agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Any final thoughts? I am going to buy a dozen goats at Costco later today. So if you want a goat, Evelyn has warned you that it's in violation of your HOA obligation.
Right.
Goat in the back bedroom. And don't let him make too much noise
or too much mess.
Put a couple of barking dogs in a different room in front of him so that Bernie.
I just have a comment about, we were talking earlier about the US involvement in World War II. I highly recommend, if you have a chance to see Ken Burns' series on the Holocaust, to do that. It's really enlightening.
Very, very good. Very, very good.
The one on PBS, is that the one?
Yeah, PBS has been having them. Yeah.
Yes. Excellent.
Riva.
Yeah, I want to back up something Evelyn said earlier about the Jewish religion or the Jewish culture encourage questioning and curiosity. And I'm sure it's apocryphal, but I love the story that Einstein, when he came home from school, his mother never asked him, "What did you say that was smart in the class?" She always asked him, "Did you ask good questions?"
One of
Yeah.
the things,
Interesting.
one of the things that's always amazed me about the beginning of Pesach in Egypt, when God said, on this particular night, you will kill the lamb, you will put the blood on the doorpost, you will have only unleavened bread because you are going to be leaving fast in the morning. Now there was what, several 100,000 people there, and they all got the word. Amazing. I mean, we have television, we have radio, we have all this, but all these 100,000 people got the word to do this on this particular night and to leave at this particular time in the morning. I'm always amazed.
Mhm.
It was quite an email that went out.
Don't underestimate God.
Thank you for everybody's participation today. I'll let you know when the Passover hike is scheduled. And we're hiking for 40 years through the Sonoran Desert. We do have 2 courses coming up. We're hoping to run, if we get sufficient enrollment. We've been running at a very low enrollment for these 2 for I don't know why. One is gratitude and one is America's Four Gods. So they're supposed to start, one is supposed to start next week and the other week after. So if you're interested, Riva Litt is our indomitable chairperson of the Adult Education Committee, and you could talk directly to her or to me. We now close with the final blessing. I'll turn it back to Steve.
Let us begin with the blessing. Baruch
Baruch
atah
atah Adonai,
Eloheinu melech haolam, asher
asher
natan
natan
Torah
Torah
emet,
v'chayei
v'chayei
olam
olam
v'natah
v'natah
Baruch
Baruch
atah
atah
Adonai,
Adonai,
Eloheinu
Eloheinu
Torah.
Torah.
Blessed is
Blessed is Adonai, our God,
ruler of the universe, who has
who has given us a teaching of faith,
planting
planting within us eternal life.
Blessed are you.
Adonai, giver of the Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
Everyone have a great
Amen.
rest of the day, and we'll see you either Friday night or, oh, and don't forget to bring your cans of fruit to the temple. We got a week left to do it, so the box is not full.
Okay,
Okay?
right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Good to
Bye-bye.
have you back, Rabbi.
Yes.
Steve, can
Yes,
you bring
yes.
fruit in February if you didn't bring it
Yeah,
in?
of course, of course.
I was really annoyed. My Zoom froze up. I had to go out of it